My name is Angelina Bess, and this is my presentation on infant and toddler cognitive development. A little slight introduction. I will be taking what we learned in this week's readings, viewings, and ELOF, and I will be breaking down and explaining the major steps in cognitive development for both infants and toddlers. Throughout these slides, we will talk about cognitive skills, how they have changed my perspective, cognitive learning in both infants and toddlers, and ending with a reflection on what has been learned. The main ELOF domain that I will be focusing on is cognition and focusing mainly on age group 0 to 3 years old. Cognitive skills, first and foremost, memory, the ability to retain information such as an object or familiar face while also being aware of changes. The course resources I used as an example was emergent mathematical thinking. Study shows that infants are able to choose the higher amount of dots. This shows ability to remember objects and differences between them. And the ELOF connection is child recognizes differences between familiar and unfamiliar people, objects, actions, or events. Moving to exploration and discovery, being able to understand the world around them by utilizing curiosity in order to observe a question. The course resource that I used was Early STEM Learning Continued. Toddlers will use the scientific method to come to a conclusion. For example, walking through muddy puddles and leaving footprints, they can assume that by changing the way they interact with the puddle, the prints left behind will change as well. An ELOF connection for this specific category is child actively explores people and objects to understand self, others, and objects. Cognitive skills part two, imitation and symbolic representation. This is copying actions they see adults doing and correlating objects to others that they are already familiar with. The course resource that I use as an example is Imitation and Symbolic Representation and Play. A toddler uses a spoon to feed a doll, just like they have experiences with their parents doing for them. The ELOF connection is child uses pretend play to increase understanding of culture, environment, and experiences. Moving on to change perspective. Starting out first skill, infants understanding numbers and quality. Although this is more related to ratios than actual numbers, they are still able to address and acknowledge the difference. My shifted perspective is I was unaware that such young children had the cognitive ability to comprehend numerical differences. This shows that infants' brains are more advanced than what I had previously thought. The connections that I made to this week's resources and ELOF is emergent mathematical thinking, being able to choose which card had the higher number, again, like in memory. And for ELOF, child uses memories as a foundation for more complex actions and thoughts. Moving on to the next skill that changed my perspective, thinking like scientists. Like scientists, children will observe, they will be forming, observing questions, making predictions, designing and carrying out experiences, and discussing. This shifted my perspective because this showed me that rather than just utilizing sensory exploration, children actually look at things in a scientific way in order to solve an issue. Again, proving to me that their brains are far more developed than we typically think. Connections I made, what do babies think? I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's Gopnik, explains that rather than just comprehending surface level curiosity, children use the same problem solving method as actual scientists. The ELOF connection is child actively explores people and objects to understand self, others, and objects. Part 3 of Changed Perspective, the skill is logical reasoning. Rather than just reacting to objects and actions, infant will adjust responses and conclusions based off of previous evidence. Shifted perspective is I assumed rational logic only formed later in the development process. It was very shocking, and this is something I didn't expect and honestly was taken back because of the societal norms placed on what is expected of infants. The connections I made was the surprisingly logical minds of babies. Scholes explains how infants often don't react to what they are shown, rather they use logic to establish properties and outcomes. And of course, the ELOF connection, child uses reasoning and planning ahead to solve problems. Cognitive learning in infants. My key takeaways are that infants are active learners rather than just observing surface level information. They also have the ability to understand others' intentions and or preferences. ELOF connection. Child uses memories as a foundation for more complex actions and thoughts. And the evidence that I am using to support this is infants have the ability to notice changes or disruptions in patterns, which shows probability reasoning, which was in the New York Times video. Now, moving on to cognitive learning in toddlers, my key takeaways were toddlers use scientific thinking in order to develop their cognitive skills and engage in trial and error learning. ELOF connection, child learns to use a variety of strategies in problem solving, and the evidence used to support this is toddlers often adjust their approach to issues based off of evidence and results in previous child trials, and this was a foundation established by Scholes. My reflection on the application for future impact, I will be being more mindful of children's cognitive abilities, and I will observe with intentions of seeing a higher learning ability rather than just the societal norms that are placed on children. What I'm going to look for is children being more comfortable with challenges or getting frustrated quicker, kind of make that reflection on what they're comfortable with and move from there. I will also, building off of that, look at boredom with different level activities. So if a child is developing faster than their peers, I will make sure to create activities that can sustain their level of learning. For adjusted approach, I will integrate more challenging activities into the curriculum, now knowing that children's brains have a higher ability than what I initially assumed. And I also will focus on each individual student and how they respond to different developmental strategies. Again, building on how each child develops at different rates, and I want to make it fair in the educational process for everyone. Here are my references. I hope you guys enjoyed my slides. Thank you so much.